Welcome to r/AskReddit, in which some of the most thought-provoking, alarming, appalling, and sometimes frightening questions are asked. In this entry, one topic shall be covered which is disturbing as well as scary, which shows the horrifying extents that some malevolent people will go in order to take money to their pockets. The following topic covered in this video will make you hate the minor antagonist from the movie The Incredibles more. And I'm not talking about Syndrome, but I'm referring to Bob's boss, Mr. Huff, the supervisor in InsurAcare. The fact that this despicable character is extremely profit-focused and only cares about stockholders instead of helping people should be a perfect indicator of his evil demeanor. Which brings us to the following question. Serious Americans, what is your insurance horror story? And I know that this story and this trend are most definitely something old that was forgotten as quickly as you forget a meme or a video that went viral in whatever platform to share videos. Nevertheless, I feel that this topic is relevant to the people of the US because they live something so horrific, which is a healthcare system that is anything but fair and quite random and arbitrary. Now that the water has flown beneath the bridge, here's my little grain of salt. Without further ado, let's begin. Story number 1. My study got hospitalized for a week from heart failure. Literally guaranteed death without getting medical help. Lungs were filled with fluid and he was effectively drowning. Insurance decided that the entire stay was completely unwarranted because, according to them, it didn't seem like he was sick enough. They didn't want to cover anything related to it. While we were eventually successful, it took years to find. Bill was in the six figures. Story number 2. My father was a doctor with a pre-existing conditions before Obamacare, which meant the only health insurance he could get was through his state's pool of last resort. He took 30% of his income as he was self-employed and working in a very rural area. He was the only physician in his specialty for 75 miles. And when things got desperate for his patients, would allow them to pay in piano lessons, vegetables, whatever, instead of cash if they needed to. He had a stroke and died on his bathroom floor, but lived on life support for 4 more days. $350,000 later, including a $70,000 helicopter flight for 30 miles, a man who dedicated his life to medicine and donated all of his organs to science died less than a broke because of healthcare's cost. Story number 3. Far less severe than what I'm sure will populate this thread, but a terrific example of the nonsense that is American health insurance. During COVID, I was working for a Hawaii-based organization, but on the East Coast. Someone in my office popped positive for COVID, so everyone in the office went to a testing site to get tested. My claim for the COVID test was denied because I didn't go to one of the approved testing sites for my insurer. All of the approved sites were in Hawaii. At the time, you couldn't travel to Hawaii without proof of a negative COVID test. So the only way I could get the cost of a COVID test covered was if I went to an approved testing site. But in order to travel to any of the approved testing sites, I needed to show a negative COVID test. Story number 4. My dad is an oncologist, and he says that there has been an uptick in the number of arbitrary denials by insurance companies for claims that should absolutely be covered under the patient's plan. When they are appealed, they'll often eventually be approved, but the whole process moves really slow, which can be a death sentence given early treatment is critical when dealing with cancer. It almost seems like the insurance companies are delaying shit on purpose in the hopes that the patient will die before they have to pay for treatment. Story number 5. Year 2008. went into hospital for ruptured intestine due to Crohn's disease. Yeah, the same one that Mr. Beast does have. Airlifted to Mayo Clinic, high on fentanyl for the pain. Spent a month in hospital. Came out with no colon and looking like a Holocaust survivor. Wife felt like something was wrong. Went into Upgyn to check on baby. No heartbeat at 8 months. They induced labor. Buried my son. Received a bill for $110,000 for Mayo Clinic, which the insurance company denied. Received a bill for $20,000 for abortion, which the insurance company denied. Spent 4 months of daily calls with hospital and insurance company fighting charges all the way down to $12,000. Story number 6. Not me, but someone I know was diagnosed with cancer in her early 30s. Her oncologist found cancer cells in her lymph nodes, indicating that it had metastasized. So, he ordered a fully body MRI to assess where it had spread to. Her insurance denied it because they said she was too young to be considered at risk, despite her actively having cancer. They did eventually approve it, but not without a lot of pressure from her doctor. Story number 7. My wife had an emergency surgery for an spontaneous retinal detachment. Literally minutes away from going blind. Insurance tried not to pay because they had not gotten pre-authorization, and then after that claimed a spontaneous event was a pre-existing condition. Story number 8. My girlfriend had kidney failure as a child and had been in dialysis for over 15 years. She graduated college and was working as a teacher. She had to stop due to complications with her condition and go on disability. This was prior to Obamacare, so we tried to get coverage from all the insurance companies since it's impossible for anyone to afford dialysis without insurance. Every single company declined to cover her due to her pre-existing condition. Every single company declined to cover her due to her pre-existing condition. They essentially told her that she was too expensive to live. Story number 9. I work for a DME company. We exist solely for the shareholders in hopes of packaging and selling the company to a larger company like Medtronic. Our income is largely, perhaps mostly, based on overbilling Medicare. We waive patient costs all the time on the basis that we will still make record profits year over year of Medicare pays their part less than half the time they are asked to. This is happening at large across the entire healthcare industry. The system is utterly vampiric. Healthcare could be so much cheaper if there wasn't an entire for-profit industry dedicated to exploiting our poorly constructed state health system. Story number 10. My surgery to remove ovarian cancer surgically was deemed elective. The type I had wouldn't respond to chemo or radiation therapies. But since it wasn't going to immediately kill me, it was just because I wanted it apparently. Had to pay $6,000 out of pocket. Story number 11. So, I'm a diabetic. My doctor wanted Lantus insulin, but insurance wanted another, cheaper insulin that's not effective, Basaglar. So my doctor doubled the dosage. So my insurance decided to make the dosage 2 times 40 days worth, 2 weeks a month instead of 30 days worth, so I had to pay the copay twice a month. That meant 28 days a month, and most months except February have more than 28 days. I ended up having to ration my insulin, and the copay went from $25 for 40 days to $65 for 14 days in less than 2 years. That meant I had to go to the pharmacy, stand in line, get refills every 14 days, and the pharmacy ran out a lot, so I had to come back. I can't drive, so I had to walk a mile to CVS down the road for this and other medicines. I just started buffering a week at a time, just so I could deal with this inconsistency. How come your blood sugar never goes down? The doctor asked. I told him, and he shook his head, saying this was so common. He tried swapping insulin types or increasing the dosages, but the insurance said no. My A1C was like 10. Then I ended up on tree care because I married someone in the military. I got Lantus, Trulicity, and boom! My A1C dropped to 6 in less than a year. I know the military has efficiency issues, but I pay nothing out of pocket in tree care. No copay, no prescriptions, and no fees. It's like $58 a month from my wife's pension for the both of us. I mean, socialized medicine will work in this country. The companies just don't want it to. When my first wife died, the military officer was my second marriage. Her insurance dropped her because she was dead. Then they sent her a $230,000 hospital bill for her last week of life because she was on a ventilator in critical care. No, I don't live in a communal property state. But they sent her to collections and heavily implied, illegally, that I had to pay. I didn't. Let me repeat this. They sent my dead wife to collections! Then lied that I had to pay because she was dead. Bill collectors called me at work, called our son, and even my sister. Not her sister, my sister. I had legal notices and bills for her, in her name, coming as late as 8 years after her death. In fact, twice she had summons to go to court. Then, a summons for arrest for failure to appear in court. However, that sheriff had common sense and took her death certificate. He even said he was sorry for bothering me. Fucking crazy. Story number 12. My wife got her third denial for authorization from UHC for an MRI on her hip that her doctor has been trying to get her for over a year. The first reason, she didn't submit x-rays. Submitted x-rays, reapplied. The second reason, she hadn't done PT before the request. Submitted evidence that she has done PT on and off for 7 years. To no improvement, and reapplied. The third reason, she needs to have x-rays done first. This AI auto-rejection cruelty is par for the course. Story number 13. My daughter was born early and spent 7 weeks in the NICU. When she got out, we got a bill for something like $400,000, and it took months to get the hospital and insurance company to sort it out. We have stacks of paperwork showing that everything has been settled, but every so often we get a letter or call from one of them because they randomly decided that we still owe them $100,000. Story number 14. Husband was getting stem cell transplant to treat his stage 4 lymphoma. The morning of the procedure, the hospital realized we didn't have insurance because he had recently lost and quit his job and ran out of FMLA, and the previous employer had not submitted the paperwork to Cobra. We had to contact them to fax a form, and I had to write a check for $1,600 to cover the previous 2 months of Cobra, so his transplant could proceed. If my sister hadn't have gone to HS with that transplant coordinator and didn't have $2,000 in my bank, he wouldn't be here today. Story number 15. I got super sick when I was 7 and had an extended hospital stay. Unfortunately, it happened during a brief lapse in my dad's employment history, so we were briefly between insurance. I later found out my parents were bankrupt and my dad had to take on higher paying jobs he hated in order to pay it off. He eventually worked himself to death, almost literally. He worked so many hours of overtime he fell asleep at the wheel and drove off the road and crashed into a tree. Worst day of my life. He should have been enjoying his retirement by now. Instead, he's been gone for years and my mom still struggles with depression and being a widow. America needs universal healthcare. Story number 16. Definitely not as bad as others for sure, but being a type 1 diabetic, you basically are at the mercy of drug prices. South Dakota also only has 2, if you're not on corporate plan, health insurance companies, which, ironically, are part of the 2 health systems in the state, Avera and Sanford. My insulin copay seems to change constantly. The real issue that's stuck in my craw is my blood work. I went to a small clinic or hospital to get work done and was charged over $800 for routine blood work that typically cost me around $30. Called the clinic and asked why it was so expensive. They said it was because the test was taken in the hospital and not in the clinic. That's just their policy. This is a while ago, so I'm not entirely sure if it was a policy of the medical side or insurance side, but since Avera is both the healthcare and insurance company, I guess it doesn't much matter. Months later, I mentioned this to my endocrinologist, who then mentioned Quick Labs. It is an unadvertised blood test that covers everything I need for $75. Of course, this is unadvertised. Anyway, my fellow South Dakota diabetics, as for Avera Quick Labs, if your current blood work is ungodly expensive, no appointment necessary at participating facilities. Story number 17. Not much of a horror story, but more of how the fuck is this a thing? It doesn't make any sense type of story. I had to get a scan. It was actually cheaper to pay out of pocket than to go through my insurance. It would have cost me an extra $5-ish, $250-ish versus $300-ish if I went through my insurance. Story number 18. For my first pregnancy, everything was covered under my plan without issue. For my second on the same plan, I figured it would be the same. Turns out the company decided that they would only cover office visits, and any lab work was not covered in that. No blood work, no ultrasounds, nothing. When I called to get clarification, they were super vague and would just keep repeating. Office visits are fully covered. But what does an office visit include? Office visits are fully covered. I was directed to check my plan, which was just as vague. After paying for everything out of pocket, my child has the audacity to be born 2 months into the new plan year, so we had to start all over with the deductible. Story 19. Daughter was born prematurely around Christmas. Spent 3 weeks in the NICU. After a week and a half, she was downgraded from NICU level 2 to NICU level 1. Nothing changed. She was in the same unit, in the same bed. She was just no longer on a feeding tube. Insurance counted her downgrade from NICU 2 to NICU 1 as a new admission rather than a continuation of care. Because we had crossed calendar years, her new admission was subject to a new calendar year of copays, deductibles, and max out-of-pocket expenses. That meant that for a single third week NICU visit we were charged max copay, max deductible, and max out-of-pocket expenses against 2 years of coverage. Fought it for over a year before the hospital threatened to take it to collections, so we eventually gave up and paid it off. We had a good policy and the max out-of-pocket for each year was only $4,500 for $9,000 total of an NICU bill that exceeded $350,000, but that extra $405,000 for a second year. We knew we shouldn't have been required to pay short stung. Story number 20. I got a couple of stories. 1. Wife has a form of epilepsy, temporal lobe epilepsy. It all started when she was in her late 20s. At the time I was working nuclear power and we were in a refueling outage, so it was on nights. Came home at about 6 a.m. and she was still up journaling, which was very unusual. She wasn't particularly coherent, so I glanced at what she was writing, and it was page after page of mostly incoherent gibberish from a stream of consciousness that was broken. Now keep in mind, I had quite good insurance at the time as a white-collar utility worker. I managed to get her to go to bed to try to sleep, and I managed a couple hours myself, but she was back up and writing a couple hours later. I called a psychologist she had seen for unrelated things years prior to get direction. I was way out of my wheelhouse. She had me pass the phone to her, talked for a bit, and then had her give the phone back to me and come by at 5 p.m. and we'll see what we should do next. We should get over there. And after some time, she advises we need to go to a specific emergency room that can handle psychiatric evaluations, as psychiatrists are back up for upwards of 6 months for new patients around here. We get there and a decision is made to commit her to an inpatient facility involuntarily. She wasn't a self-harm risk. But as far as we can gather, the doctor was pissed that she wouldn't sign forms and let them draw blood without myself or her dad, who came with us, saying it was okay. Because even though she was compromised mentally, she recognized that much and wanted someone she trusted to say it was okay. In the end, she was transferred via sheriff's office drunk wagon, think box van with diamond plate benches, while handcuffed and drugged up 20 miles or so to the facility at 4 in the morning, and all we could do was follow it there in a car and hug her goodbye. She was then kept isolated for a week at the facility and ultimately discharged as general psychosis with antipsychotic medications and several others. After months of fighting with insurance for tests, we finally got a referral to a neurologist approved who diagnosed the seizure disorder and started her on anti-seizure medications. It was like flipping a light switch, and she was mostly accepting the antipsychotics she had to wean from back to normal. And she was mostly accepting the antipsychotics she had to wean from back to normal. That was almost 15 years ago. And now every job and insurance change we take, it's a battle of prior authorizations and coverage for medication that is necessary for her to live a normal life. Most recently, the prior authorization was approved and we got the first month of meds just fine. The second month, the insurance said we needed to switch to a 90-day fill. Fine, no issues there. Except when the pharmacy went to fill, it was denied. After days of us calling at the pharmacy they finally said we needed another prior authorization because now the cost crossed a threshold, since it was a 90-day fill. Started the process and got the runaround for about 2 weeks. After a lot of calls between us, the pharmacy, the doctor, and Cigna with no movement, the pharmacy finally got a 3-way call between them, the doctor and Cigna, and they got it approved. Yay! Except that it was going to result in the pharmacy losing close to $1,000 per fill every 90 days. They are a local pharmacy that were upfront that they couldn't do that. We tried to transfer to a commercial pharmacy and nope. Then to mail order from Cigna Express scripts. After a few days, they told us, without telling us the reason, but we know why, that they couldn't fill it. In the end, her neurologist managed to work with their university-affiliated hospital and get it filled as effectively and uncover necessary medication under some federal program, and that's where we are now. Next up, My son was a normal vaginal birth, but our cost after insurance, working for a worldwide major engineering firm in nuclear construction at the time, ended up being $7,500 out of pocket. Luckily, I earned enough that we knew it was going to be a chunk of money. There was only one insurance plan to choose from, so we had it covered. That compares to my daughter, who was born on my prior jobs. Insurance, at an out-of-pocket cost of less than $1,000, with cheaper individual premiums than the current insurance at the time. Of course, the company was covering a lot more. Next up, my son is anaphylactic to peanuts, lentils, and lupin. Has to have an EpiPen. Every year we have to get at least 3 sets because the school requires one to be checked in with the nurse. We need one for home and one for daycare. Insurance only lets you get one fill each month. So, each year we have to spend 3 months trying to get them filled so they can be checked in, as they won't take any expired medications. With our most recent change, Cigna require a prior authorization for the EpiPen. Not brand, mind you, a generic epinephrine autoinjector. What in the actual fuck?